All right, everyone, it is shortly after noon now, so we will get started. We are recording this call, and we'll be sending out a recording of it likely early on Monday morning, as well as sending out a PowerPoint later today to anyone who is unable to make it. Please feel free to forward this to any board members or staff or your executive director if they were unable to make this call, and we'll be able to make sure we connect it to them. As I'm sure many of you have noticed, once you've called in and typed in the access code, you can listen to the audio via either your telephone or through the mic and speakers option if you click on the audio button on the GoToMeeting toolbar. Just to give you a little sense of today's agenda, we are not going to take the full lunch hour, so you'll have some time after this to yourselves. Typically this takes, we'll spend about a half hour together. I want to start with thanking our sponsors. Without the help of Viterbo and the Otto Bremer Foundation, we would not be able to put this on, and we're greatly thankful for their support and able to put this on. I will also mention a bit more about FCI, what we do in our background, and then walk through some of the mechanics for the series, the baseline evaluation, an overview of the sessions, and introduce some pre-work reading. But most importantly, and I think the most value that we receive from these kickoff calls is to understand what are those burning questions that you have related to your finances. And so we want to make sure we have some time to consider those during the call and make sure that we address them in the sessions. But we also wanted to welcome you to send us an email or give us a phone call at any time at FCI if you have questions that are really on your mind. So as I said again, I want to thank our sponsors, both Viterbo University and the Otto Bremer Foundation. And we actually have Tom on the call from Viterbo. Tom, I'm going to take you off of mute. If you'd like to say a few words, I'd like to welcome you to do so now.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I would just reiterate what you just said. Viterbo University is so happy to be partnering with FCI to bring this learning series forward to our nonprofit. And we again thank the Otto Bremer Foundation for its support. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do this. So I hope everybody gets what they're looking for out of this series. And again, we thank FCI for partnering with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for those words. And you know, we've partnered with Viterbo for the last several years, and I think one of the wonderful things that we've noticed is their commitment to the community and making sure that the tools to be successful are provided there. And so I'd like to thank you once more for all the work that you do. Just to give a little bit of an introduction to FCI, we are a capacity building organization. We were originally founded in Madison, Wisconsin, in the basement of a church with a group of concerned members that wanted to see how can we end homelessness in our community. And the way that they did that, because some of their backgrounds were typically in finance, was around a community loan fund. And we started this off almost 20 years ago, and since then we've grown to a statewide organization. We changed our name to Forward Community Investments about 10 years ago. And our mission is really to transform communities by building the capacity of those mission-based organizations through low-cost capital, which is loans, expert advisory services like this learning series and one-on-one consultation, as well as other timely resources. Through that time, just as a little bit more background on some of those services that we provide, we've lent out approximately almost $40 million in loans. And when we were doing our last strategic plan, we noted that we only had 2 or 3 losses totaling less than $200,000 over that period of time. And so our board asked, what is it really about that work that makes it successful? And it's that relationships that we build with our clients and partners. At that time, we had an opportunity through the Strengthening Communities Fund grant to begin providing our advisory services and technical assistance to non-borrowing clients, and that was really the birth of our advisory services division. And so in our advisory services, we provide learning series opportunities like this around other issues, including strategic planning, collaboration, looking at systems thinking and social innovation as ways to tackle some of the challenging problems we face, as well as one-on-one consultation focused primarily on understanding your business model and strategic thinking. We're a nonprofit ourselves, so as you often find yourselves raising funds, we have to do the same for us, and that is how we're able to provide our loans throughout the community. Recently in 2012, we merged with the Wisconsin Community Fund, a local grassroots grant-making organization that provides loans to those focused on social justice and reducing the disparities in our community, so that we can provide both advising, grant, and lending throughout Wisconsin. And lastly, we try to conduct as much research as we can of the sector and in our communities to understand what are those key issues that we're facing and what can FCI do to help you reach your mission in the most effective and impactful way possible. In the past, that's been through surveys to understand your future outlook, the finances, and the decisions you're making to overcome the obstacles that you face. And going forward, we're looking into new ways to provide research on the sector to really communicate what a great impact we provide in each of our communities specifically. So stay tuned for some of our updates on those research initiatives. So next, I'd like to hear just a little bit more about who we have on the call today. So I believe you'll see you have either a chat or a questions box available on your screen. If you could type your name, your organization, and the role that you serve in that organization, whether it be the executive director, a staff, or a board member now, and just so you can get used to using those tools. So I see that several people are already starting to do this. Thank you very much. This is just a great way for us to connect and see who all we have with us today. I really appreciate that. Looks like we have about 20 or so folks on the line. Largely, I'm seeing some CFOs, quite a few executive directors. Welcome. I haven't seen, I think, 1 or 2 board members on the call. Welcome to you as well. Thank you very much. We always love it when the board members are able to participate on these calls. Great. And when we have our sessions, we'll have several activities around getting to know each other better in the community and how we can potentially work together. One other thing I'd invite you to post, just both in the chat box now for questions that we can address today while we're on the line together, but also be thinking about as we're leading into our first session, which is in just a few weeks, is what do you most want to get out of this? What are those burning questions that are keeping you up? And please let us know at any time that you see those. We really do want to understand how we can best tailor our learning to fit what you need. And we'll have some time at the end for a Q&A if there's any questions in specific that you'd like to talk through now. So this next slide, which I believe it should be showing on your screens now, provides kind of a high-level overview of the learning series and what we hope to accomplish. There's going to be several parts to this, and I think we try to use as varied of an approach as possible to make sure that we reach you in all the ways that can help your learning best. Primarily, it will be through the classroom. So looking at the learning series itself and each of the sessions on budgeting, program costs, and managing your cash flow. But what we've found to be the most effective is once you learn it, you have to put it to use. And so we use a case study of a borrower of ours that we've sanitized to remain as confidential to illustrate how looking at your budget, your costs, and cash flow in a different way can help you manage difficult situations. We provide some pre- and post work that you can apply to your own organization. We have an individual coaching, and so one of the things we've found is after we've taken this stuff and we're putting it to use in our own organization, there's often new questions that come up. And so we want to make sure that we can schedule some time one-on-one to talk about you and your organization's challenges and how we can help you overcome them. Lastly, tools and resources. We want to make sure that you have everything available to best manage your budget and finances in a way that's strategic for your organization. So we have lots of templates and tools for looking at your budget in new ways, calculating true program costs, and managing and projecting your cash flow. And we'll provide those for you so that you can actually take these and put them to work. Lastly, we'll have a virtual leadership series. This is an ongoing effort of FCI to provide learning on a variety of topics to really look at how can we integrate these into our organization. So this isn't necessarily connected directly to the learning series, but we'll have webinars available throughout the year that I think are really a great resource to take a look at. Lastly, I wanted to note there are scholarships available for this learning series. If you haven't gotten in touch with Sarah Cook, you can reach out to her. Her email is here, and I'll send that in the follow-up email as well. Lastly, and at the bottom of this page, there's a quote about sustainability here that I think really gets at the heart of what we're hoping to help with through this learning series. And that's really that sustainability encompasses both finances, so the ability to generate resources to meet our needs, but also programs to be able to deliver our mission. Often decision making, we isolate those two into different buckets, looking at the mission and delivering on that, and looking at our finances and making sure we can keep our doors open. A big goal for us is to show how we can integrate our strategic priorities and agenda into our finances and to evaluate them both together, joined, as opposed to at separate times. Because I think the more that we can connect our mission to our finances, the more impactful of an organization we can be. This next slide, just who should attend from my organization? This is a common question that comes up, and we just wanted to put it out there now. We think it's best when we learn in groups. And so having your executive director, program staff leaders, finance members, and board members, 2 to 3 members from each set of your organization can attend, and they can rotate, although we recommend having at least one, typically the executive director, attend all sessions. The reason we find it useful to have more than just one individual from your organization participate is because then when you're going back to your office and putting these ideas to work, you have a group of people that are already speaking that same language. And part of our coaching appointments are to help deliver that and help you use it, but I think we found it most impactful for those organizations that have a full participation across their organization. On the first session that we get together, we're going to start with a baseline evaluation, and I just want to kind of introduce a little bit about why we do this and why we feel it's important. This is to understand where are we feeling right now and today with our finances. What do we feel confident about? What are we uncertain about? And just generally, where's our knowledge and capacity level? This is a part of our evaluation to see if we're being impactful with the work that we're doing, and it also helps us monitor and see how well our work can help you reach your mission in a better way. And so there'll be a brief evaluation that'll kick off our sessions. We used to send it in advance and have you attend to it then, but I think we'll just bring it to the first session when we meet in February and kick it off there. So the 3 dates for our sessions are stretched out to be about 3 weeks apart. Our first one is on February 13th, where we're going to be talking about budgeting, and I'll go through the detailed agenda of each one in a little more detail before we open it up for questions. But really looking at how do we take our budget and examine it in a way that's both strategic and detailed enough so we can make decisions for changes. Our second session is on March 11th, calculating true program costs. This is understanding what does it actually take to provide our services, and not just delivering the services, but managing the full organization. So our true costs are both the costs that go directly to programs and those administrative costs to manage them and keep them ongoing. Our last session is on managing cash flow in unpredictable times. I think we've all felt that over the past several years, it's been very difficult to say where are we going to be 2 or 3 years from now. But projecting cash flow is an important way to examine what we've learned in the past and how can we use that to anticipate future challenges so that we can build our reserves and operate in a more sustainable manner. So the agenda for our first session really is to introduce budgeting and look at the different types of budgets, the line item budgets, and moving towards program-based budgets that accurately reflect all of the work that we do in a way that best can use it as a tool for our organization. We'll learn how to adopt a mission-based approach to budgeting. This is where we incorporate our strategic goals into our budget. And so as we make changes to our budget and say, okay, well, if we're going to have to grow this by 15%, what does that mean for programming and our impact? Or if we have to cut a program, what will that mean? And so really tying those together is an important way to bring our budgeting into a strategic lens. We're going to talk a little bit about segregating program costs from one another, but we'll really be focusing on this on the next one, in the next class on calculating true program costs. And we'll also be focusing on using cash reserves as a way of budgeting strategy for building sustainability. Our second course, calculating true program costs, this is really about looking at overhead, which I think all of us have faced, whether through applications for grants or through general funding requests that we send out into the community, understanding how to allocate our costs so that we get a real picture of what does it take to operate, both for each program that we operate individually as well as the organization as a whole, and how do we allocate those across. Because distributing those costs accurately really helps us understand the impacts of decisions if we're shifting a program. If 200 more people come in our office for services than the year before, what does that mean for us? How do we look at that? What does that mean financially? This session will really help provide those tools so that we can really understand what that would be. And also, and I think almost more importantly, understanding how to communicate our financial condition to stakeholders in a way that they will understand the impact of their decisions to donate to us and how much value those investments in our organizations can really make. Finally, then, with our third course on managing cash flow, this is really taking a look at the projections. And so looking at budgets and cost allocation is usually looking at historical information. Cash flows are about looking forward. And so projecting that forward to see what do we expect to have happen in the next year on a month-to-month basis can really help us understand where are those pinch points where we may have a cash flow crunch and need to use reserves or potentially versions of credit to be able to continue to operate well. These cash flow projections are a great tool when communicating with funders, stakeholders, and lenders as a way to manage cash flow problems and use cash reserves or credit to really effectively develop through those. And so this class is really about looking forward and moving towards that approach. So I've seen several questions coming in as we go, and I really appreciate that, and we will get to those at the end of the session. If you do have more questions about anything we've covered so far, please do continue to post those in, and we will address them at the end. Along with the follow-up PowerPoint slide and recording, we'll also be sending out a couple articles. Some of these came out several years ago, but I think they provide a really concise summary of what we hope to accomplish. In particular, an Executive Director's Guide to Financial Leadership was published actually now about 2 or 3 years ago from an organization, a sister organization to FCI based out of Minnesota, the Nonprofit Assistance Fund. And it really outlines what are those key things that take us from financial management to financial leadership. And we're really going to be talking about each of them in detail as we go through each session. Another article that I think is useful is looking at the nonprofit life cycle stages. There's a summary in the Fieldstone Alliance that was published a while back, and it's looking at our organization from a broad perspective and understanding that depending on the maturity of our organization, whether we're a new organization that's all funded and run by volunteers versus organizations that have been established, have a staff, a management, administrative function in addition to their programming, and the different types of challenges we have. I think this is useful context as we look at our budgeting and particularly our program costs to understand where are we going and what are those big questions that we have coming up. And we'll be touching on this throughout each of our sessions as we move on. So I've moved pretty quickly through things in about a 20-minute period. So if you have more questions that you'd like to have covered now before we begin, I'd like to open that up. I see several people have added some things about goals for the series, understanding financial decisions and how they should be made, whether it be through the financing committee or through the entire board. I think that's a great topic for discussion, and we can bring that into the sessions because I think there's a lot of different perspectives on that one. Best way to forecast for 3 to 5 year plans. I think this might be both strategically thinking about our planning, but also with our budgets. Typically what we've seen, just as an aside to that, is that it's hard to say if we were to move 3 to 5 years back, would we have been able to predict where we are today? The answer to that is typically not. And so what we've recommended is organizations think closely about strategic thinking as opposed to strategic planning, and so that as we develop plans for the future, we develop them in a way that's not static, but is actually dynamic and reactive to the conditions that we're working in. And we'll talk about that and how that relates to our budgeting and also some other resources that you can use. That would be a great topic for some of our speed coaching sessions where we'll have a 1-hour appointment with you via the phone to kind of go through some of the different challenges or issues that you're facing. One great question here is how assess the potential risk of financial losses in new projects. And so when we're looking at uncertainty, how do we evaluate that? And I think there's a component to that for both budgeting and for managing cash flows that we'll talk about. And then a third component to that is understanding what is it actually going to cost to do something. If we're adding a new program, what do we expect that to cost, and what do we think those different adjustments can make? So we'll be talking about that in each of our sessions in quite a bit as we look forward at how do we strategically move forward. Another great question on financial limits, being open to failure when taking risks. One of the things that we find is for an organization to be effective, it needs to learn quickly and react. And oftentimes the learning cycle of feedback, if we're starting a new program, isn't until the end of the grant when we're taking a look at how successful it is. And so we can talk about how we can incorporate review points and checkpoints to look at our programs and how can we evaluate them both financially and with a mission lens to really understand what we're doing. So these are some great questions that we have coming in, and I'll be sure to bring these in to our sessions, and we'll be making sure to ask at each and every session, what would we take away from our last session together, and what are those questions that we have moving forward so that we can incorporate them. If there's any other questions or comments, I'd be happy to take them through the chat box now. Sounds like things are moving pretty well. I would just like to emphasize again for the logistics. I will move back in our presentation to our schedule. Our next session, February 13th, registration will begin at 12:30. The session will actually go from 1 to 4:30. The location information is available up here. We're really looking forward to meeting with you and gathering. If you have any other questions leading into the session about the Learning Series topics, or if you have something that's on your mind now and you'd like to have a conversation about it before we get in, please send us an email. You can reach us at advisoryservices@forwardci.org, or you can email me directly at benw@forwardci.org. We'll be sure to send out that contact information. One other question came in that I think is a really common and great one, and that's about what is the ideal level of cash on hand to have? Unfortunately, the answer is it depends on your organization, but we will talk a lot about what that looks like and how that can be an important way to evaluate our organization and set some goals for what makes us sustainable. And I think it can really vary depending on the types of programming you provide and your organization's context, but we will definitely be covering that. All right, again, I can't say again how excited we are at FCI to meet you all and really get to working together. So again, we will be meeting on February 13th. The registration and networking, and this will be a time where you can fill out your evaluation, will be at 12:30, and the session will begin and move through until 4:30 that day. So I will be sending out the follow-up feedback with a recording of this session as well as those follow-up materials on Monday morning. I will send it to anyone that you forwarded the meeting to as well, but if there are other staff members or board members that will be attending the sessions that you would like to send those materials to, please forward them on or let us know. And lastly, again, if you are interested in scholarships, please do email Sarah Cook to connect with her about those applications, and she can get in touch with you regarding that. So have a wonderful weekend and take care, and we will see you in just a few weeks.